In this demo, we'll take a look at using Okta as an SSO provider, as well as the directory server, and use SKIM to synchronize group and user data between Okta and Border0. And this means that we can use Okta groups directly in Border0 policies. Finally, we'll look at an IoT device that runs a number of Docker containers, and we'll see how we can create a Border0 service or socket of type Docker, which will automatically detect all of the running containers on that host and provide the users in specific Okta groups with access to these Docker containers. You'll see that all of this is super easy and will just take a few minutes to set up. So let's dive in. To start, we'll first set up Okta as a single sign-on provider. You can follow along in the documentation on docs.border0.com, which has a great explanation of how to do this. We'll start in the Okta portal and we'll create a new application of type OIDC and select type web application. I'll give it a name. In this case, I'll use Border0. Everything else can remain the same. And all that we need to change is the redirect URL. The correct URL can be found in our documentation, so I'll just copy paste that and we'll put that in there. We'll allow access for everyone, and that's it. Now we can just hit save, and a new OpenID Connect integration has been configured in Okta. It's ready for use. Next up, I'll go back to the docs, which will tell us that the next part needs to be configured in the Border0 portal. So I'll head there, and from here on it's easy. Here I'm going to organization settings and then identity providers. I click the new button and select Okta Workforce. I have to give it a name, so I'll give it the name Okta. Pretty straightforward, same for display name. And next up, it needs the Okta domain. The Okta domain is the unique Okta identifier, and we can find it in the Okta portal here. So I'll copy that, paste it here. And then finally, all we need is the client ID and the client secret. And those were previously generated by Okta. So I'll go back to the Okta portal, copy the client ID as well as the client secret. And that's it. We have now configured Okta as our SSO provider. Just remember to enable it, and now we can test it. How to test it? Well, we can click on the blue client portal button on the top right of our screen here, and I'll select my organization, and as you can see, there's now an Okta button. So I'll click on continue with Okta, and since I'm already logged in, that just works. And now I'm logged in with my Okta account, and we validated that our SSO setup works. Next up, we'll configure a SCIM integration between Okta and Border0, and this will allow us to use Okta as the directory server, which will allow us to automatically synchronize users and groups from Okta into our Border0 account. You can find the instructions for directory syncing and SCIM on our docs website, so we'll use that. We'll start in the Border0 portal. We'll browse to Teams and then Directory Services, and then I'll click on Okta SCIM 2.0. We'll just give it a name, and that's it. Now we have a token, so I'll copy that. And we can use that to configure the Okta side of things. So I'll go back to the documentation, and this will tell us exactly how to configure our Okta account. So with that, we'll go back to Okta, and we'll click on Applications. And then from here, we go to the application catalog, and we'll find SCIM. It's very important to use SCIM 2.0 with OAuth bearer token. So that's the one that I will select. Then we click Add Integration, and now we can go and configure the integration. In most cases, the defaults are just fine, so I'll click Next. And here as well, everything can stay the same, so I'll click Done. And once that's done, we can go to the Provisioning tab and click Configure API. And we can enable the API integration like that. And now all we need is the base URL and the secret. So the base URL you can find in our documentation here. So I'll copy paste that and put that in here. And if you forgot the OAuth bearer token, you can go back to the portal, hit copy token, and we'll just put it back in there. And now we're ready to test it. So we'll hit test API credentials. So that's it. So our SCIM integration is now ready to use. There's just one more thing we need to do. We need to enable the syncing of the users. So I'll enable users and the attributes as well as deactivate users. Then we'll hit save. And now that's done. And then finally, we need to go to assignments, find the users that we want to be synced. So here we just filter out the users that we'd like to add. So I'll assign people. I have 2 users in here. So I'll hit that and hit save. We'll do the same for Curtis here. We'll add that one too. And that's it. So now these two users should show up and be pushed to the Border0 portal. So if I hit refresh, and you now can see that under users we have 2 new users that came from Okta as indicated by the Okta icon. The same for groups. So I have a group called SRE, which has a few of my Okta users in there. So I'll add that to the SCIM configuration. And then I'll also make sure that that gets pushed out. So we'll do push groups. We'll find the group that we just assigned called SRE. So let's type in SRE here. And then we'll save that. And if I now go back to the Border0 portal, we should see a group called SRE. And if I click on it, I can see the 2 Okta users are in there. So this shows you clearly how we imported 2 users from Okta as well as a group called SRE that is defined in Okta, and we inherited or imported all of those definitions. Now next up, let's start using this new group. I'm going to create a new policy. I'll create a policy called IoT users. And in that group, I'm going to allow everything, like all actions are allowed. I'm going to remove all the defaults, and I'm going to add under allowed groups the SRE group. And this is the SRE group that we inherited or imported from Okta. And so now we've created a policy where SRE users, as defined in Okta, have access. So just to recap what we've done so far, we added Okta as an SSO provider to our Border0 organization, meaning that users can authenticate using their Okta SSO credentials. And secondly, we also configured SCIM between Okta and Border0, meaning that we can automatically import all users and groups from Okta into our Border0 account and can use that in Border0 policies to control who has access to what services. The first step is to install the Border0 connector onto the IoT device. Now there are various ways to do that. Since I'm using Docker Compose for this demo, I'm going to create a connector manually first and then add it to my Docker Compose file so that everything including the connector runs in Docker. So first I'll add the connector, and after that we'll create a token, and that's it. Make sure that you set an expiration of no expiration here so things don't end unexpectedly. So with that, head to our terminal and I'll edit the Docker Compose file. And first I'll add the Border0 token to the connector as an environment variable. One thing to note is that I'm also passing the Docker socket to the connector as a volume so that the Border0 connector can detect all of the Docker containers and make access super easy. As you can see, I have various containers in here. So after I start this, we should have all of our containers up and running. So let's start Docker Compose and launch our containers. So as you can see, the container and the connector are now up and running. They are available, they show up as active or online. So that means we can start using them. So the first thing we'll do is actually create a new socket. I'll go here, add new socket, and we'll select the socket of type Docker. And this will demonstrate how we can automatically detect all of the Docker containers. So we use docker exec as the upstream configuration, create new socket. And you can see a warning here. This means that no policy has been attached. That's because I don't have an org-wide policy. Now we earlier created the IoT user policy, so I'll assign that to this socket. And I can just quickly click on it just to validate that indeed we have access to everything and only the SRE group is allowed. So with that, I can now go back, I'll hit connect, and let's see what happens. So I need to log in with my Okta credentials. That is great, as expected. So I'll click there. And so now I get a shell, and it will present me with all of the Docker containers running on this IoT device. So I'll just select one, and I have a shell. So that's amazing. So this is good. Maybe let's try another one. So I'll hit connect again, open up a new tab. And here we are now presented again with all of the containers that are running on this machine. And I'll select another one, and now I'm onto the Border0 connector itself. So that's amazing. That just works as expected. Very low friction, easy to get going with. So what we can now also do is we have an HTTP socket. So one of those containers actually runs HTTP server. So let's make that available as well. So I'm going to create an HTTP socket. We'll give it a name. In this case, something like Nginx IoT. And the host name is just the name of the Docker container, since we're all running on the same device. So the name of the container was Nginx server 0. So I'll copy paste that. Potentially you can set an SNI header if that's important to the app. In this case, it doesn't really matter. We have the same challenge here with the policy. So if you don't want this, you can set a default org-wide policy. But in this case, I don't like that. So I'm going to set the IoT user policy again, which means that all of the SRE users should have access. And if I click on that now, I can access the web application on that Docker container as well. If I go back to session logs here now, I should be able to see all of the sessions that we've just created. You can see the Andre at border0.com users. This is an Okta user, and we can see all of the sessions. So let's see how continuous authorization works and SCIM. So I'm starting some top sessions. You can see all of this works. So if I now go back to the Okta portal, and go to the directory service. And what I'm going to do is remove the user Andre from the group SRE. And we're going to take a look at how long that takes. And we'll see that this is all in real time. So I'm going to remove this user, and that's it. So what we should see right away is that these sessions are being terminated, right? So this is the real-time nature of our application. Also, if I refresh this web page, you can see I'm immediately unauthorized. So that works really well. If you go to sessions now, we should be able to see that those sessions have been denied and terminated because, again, no longer is the access allowed. Finally, if we go back to groups, and we look at SRE, you can see that the user Andre is no longer in the SRE group. So I'm going to add the user Andre back, so that's to make sure that I have access again. And let's take a look if that works. I've added you back, so I'm going to hit connect, and we should see this menu again. As you can see, I can now see all the containers. And one thing to note is I'm going to show you how we can filter out containers. You can see I have a few Ubuntu containers, and they all start with root Ubuntu server 0 dash and then the number. And let's say I only want to have users access to those Ubuntu containers. So we can add a container name filter and wildcard it. So I'll just say everything that starts with root Ubuntu server and then star. So that means that I should no longer see the connector or the Redis container or the Nginx container. And here you can see that I only saw the Ubuntu containers, right? So this shows the filtering capabilities in case you don't want to have access to all of the containers. Also want to show you that you don't just have to use the web app, you can also use the CLI. So in this case, I'm using the CLI to log in to my organization. Then I go back and type in Border0 client SSH, and I should see all of the SSH sockets that I have access to according to the policy. I'll select that Docker IoT device. I can now see all of those Ubuntu servers again, and now I have access to that. So in today's demo, we saw how easy it was to integrate Border0 with your Okta environment, both for a SSO provider, but also as a directory service. And we saw how we can easily synchronize both users and groups. We saw how all of that is real time, and we saw the continuous evaluation and authorization at work. I removed the user, and immediately all of the sessions for that user were invalidated. We also saw how easy it was to make all of the Docker containers on a particular device available to users. We automatically discovered all of the Docker containers and made it easy to for this user to access that. So hopefully this was useful. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. We're here to help.